Today on Adversity to Strength, I'm joined by Scott Eckenblatt, author of Pretend They Are Dead, for a deeply moving conversation about abandonment, silence, and the long shadow of family trauma. Stephen was just a child when his biological father abruptly left his life, disappearing from him, his siblings, and their world. Years later, he would discover that his father had been advised by a psychiatrist to cope with the separation by emotionally erasing his children, to pretend they were dead. That phrase would come to define not only Stephen's childhood, but the emotional legacy he came to adulthood. Raised in a household marked by fear, control, and unspoken pain, Stephen learned early how to survive by staying silent. Decades later, a chance and shocking encounter with his estranged father would reopen wounds he had buried for years and ultimately lead him to confront the truth of what was lost, what was withheld, and what could still be reclaimed. Now, a trial lawyer, author, and father himself, Stephen reflects on the impact of parental abandonment, the cost of emotional disconnection, and what it means to break generational cycles by choosing presence, accountability, and love. This is a conversation about grief that never had language, the damage done by well-intended but devastating advice, and the resilience it takes to become a parent and the person you never had. Stephen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been worth the wait to finally get to speak with yourself.
Yeah, no, thank you, Lee. I really appreciate the invitation. And for your listeners who are watching this is my book cover, and I know we'll be talking a lot about it. So you have some point of
Definitely.
reference about the book.
Yeah. Yeah. And the book, just there's so much in the book there as well. And I'm really interested in knowing more about it there as well. Of your journey. Where did your journey actually start there?
Sure. My journey started, of course, as a child
Yeah.
and going through all the things that I went through. One of the main chapters, one of the main this book is my parents got divorced when I was very young. My father, biological father, was a veterinarian, and my mother, without telling us, decided she was going to get married one weekend to another man and bring him and his four kids into our house. So if you can imagine being, 8 years old, showing up at your house and there's another man has moved in and his kids have moved in, and he turned out to be a very, violent, bossy, narcissistic person. And he laid down some really intense rules that we had to live with and we weren't used to. This was in New Jersey, and some of the rules were like, we had to there's 9 people. We could only walk in the back door. We weren't allowed to walk in the front door. We weren't allowed in the kitchen. We weren't allowed to sit on the furniture. We weren't allowed to eat meals with my parents, which was it's ironic because, in today's world, meals are supposed to be the place where you learn
Yeah.
call it a place where you spend time with your family, and we weren't even allowed in the kitchen, and definitely not when they were eating. So, but he was a nasty person, and a violent person, and so that's sort of the backdrop for then trying to grow up in that scenario. um, it led me like down a different path than I probably would have gone on. So so I wound up spending a lot of time, hiding, basically hiding within myself, hiding in the closet where I would read books constantly, and just try to figure out how to.
Yeah.
It's like being in a minefield. It's like being in an actual minefield where if you turn the wrong way, you're going to get screamed at or punched or hit or whatever.
Yeah. That seems very control and very narcissistic relationship. I mean, how long did that last with your mum there?
Well, it was really my entire childhood. But one of the things that happened is my biological father stopped seeing us. He dropped us off one day and never came back. He lived in the same he lived in the same town. And I always say I would have rather have been adopted at birth than been
Of
adopted
course.
later on by my adopted father, because my biological father knew me, lived in the same town, and gave me up. And just turned his back on me and my brother and my sister, and we never really knew why. And, when you're a kid, you compartmentalize things. You're in England, like, if you're born to the king and queen, wow, good for you. If you're born to shit, well, bad for you. Like, those are your
Yeah.
circumstances. because I've been asked a lot of questions. Well, how did you survive, or what did you think? And I'm like, I didn't sound like you know any different.
You
This
just
has
like,
been,
yeah, you just do it. This is it.
yeah, this is it. These are my parents. This is my family. This is how our family works. So one of the first chapters of the book, one of the things that happened to me was I was working at a tennis court in New Jersey. One was the 4th of July, which is our Independence Day. So it's a
Yeah.
big day. Nobody's at the court. I was 16 years old. I'd ridden my Schwinn 10-speed varsity bike, which I was very proud of. They were big here, in the US, man, the Schwinn varsity bike 10 speed. I was, you're a superstar if you could ride that. I had my bike. I rode to the courts. I started working on the courts. And I still remember because we're next to there's a swimming pool next door to us, next to sort of the course where there was a club. So there's all these kids running around, having a great time. I'm there by myself, sweeping the courts, working. And at some point, I heard this car screaming, like these tires squealing. And about probably 20 yards from where I was, a car hits a telephone pole. I don't know if you've ever seen or if your listeners have ever witnessed a car accident, or any kind of accident like that involving trauma, but it was just a huge explosion,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I I I didn't know. I was kind of I was like totally freaked out, don't know what to do, don't know what direction to go in. Ran around the fence, went out to where the car was. Guy had gone through the windshield, went back. My heart's pounding, and it's just pounding like it's like slow motion. It's like, is this, you don't even know. It's like you're living in a movie, and I ran to the telephone. I ran to the telephone, payphone, called, tried to call the operator, and eventually, the police come, ambulance comes, and I go back up, and they have him. He had been unconscious, but now they have him on the ground, next to the car, and his face had been split in two, and he was in bad shape. And as I was standing there, I turned and decided, well, this is, nothing more I can do. I'm going to leave. And I like turned my body. I could see my bike, my Schwinn Varsity, against a tree, and I could feel something. Like I felt like these eyes on me. I could just feel, like, how you're somewhere and you just know somebody's looking at you, even though you don't see
Yeah.
them. And so I turned, and he was, his eyes were open, the driver, and he was just staring at me. And like I said, one of his face was split in two. He had a lot. He wound up getting a ton of stitches. And the police officer that was there pulled out his wallet and said, "Does anybody know this man?" And his name is Alan Nessel. And that was my biological father. Uh, and that was, like I had read in the book, not the reunion I wanted. I didn't say anything. I just got on my bike, rode back home, and never told anybody that I was there until I was 40 years old. I just buried it.
What? How old were you at the time?
16.
16. When that's all going through your head, did you then like recognize him?
No, oh, no, no, I didn't
Oh,
recognize him. I just had, I mean, of course, it was a long time ago, but I just remember him staring at me, and I remember on the side, he wrecked his car, he hit this pole, and on the side of the car, there was like a doctor of veterinary medicine, like, insignia. And so that's kind of when I was standing there, starting to feel something was up, something different. Look, you're 16 years old, you're at the tennis court, I'm probably thinking about going out partying. And the last thing I expect is some guy to hit a telephone pole feet from where I'm standing. And that guy who almost died right in front of me turns out to be my biological father. I mean, he was very close to death. And
yeah.
I was the one who called the ambulance and everything else.
What were you feeling then, like riding home? Do you even remember the ride home? Were you like numb to everything? What happened?
I was just numb to it. I just buried
Yeah.
it. It's just like, this is just another day in my life.
Yeah. Did you not think I'm going to tell like my siblings?
No, I wasn't that close. Even though there were seven of us, there wasn't really anybody for me to tell. There really wasn't. Our family was very divided.
Sure.
He was my biological father. I had a twin sister and a brother. I never just I was a teenage boy. I didn't talk to my sisters. I didn't talk to my adopted father. My mother, I was afraid to tell. It just created more. I didn't want to bring attention to myself. This is really, I think that's how would explain it. Is I just didn't want to bring attention to myself because nothing good comes to my house from attention. You know, you just try to stay out of the you know out of the minefields.
Yeah. And how did you go about burying it? What did you do there? Because that's like, just seeing an accident like that, that's traumatic in itself. And then you see the person there, and you got all these emotions coming up. It's not easy to bury. How did you do that? Did you just like focus on something else as much as you
Well,
could?
to be totally transparent, which I am, because when you write a memoir, you write what happens is I
Yeah.
am sure that I went to my buddy's house, my friend's house, and we rolled 20 joints or something. And we listened to some Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, and because that was the time, and I just forgot about it, just moved on, never told him,
Mm.
and I'm still in touch with it. This
Yeah.
his name was Billy. I talk about it in the book. I still talk to
Yeah.
him, and I questioned him. Did I ever say anything? He goes, "No, you've never ever talked about your father." And most people didn't know I had a father, a biological father.
So what happened with yourself after that then? You just kind of like, well, let's get back to normality. Let's block it out. Let's move on there. And
Well,
what-
what happened was that I wound up, uh, just I wound up moving to Florida the next year. So my adopted father, I'd been adopted, my name got changed, and they decided that it'd be better for us to live in Florida. I was a senior in high school, so I'd been in one place my entire life, and then we picked up and moved our whole family to Sarasota, Florida, against my wishes. I mean, the last thing I wanted to do was leave my home turf, leave my friends. You're going
yeah.
into your last year of high school.
Worst time.
Yeah. It was a horrible time, and as I was going through the process of writing the book, I realized how much anger I still had, and I was insecure as it was because I didn't have any family support. Grew up in
Mal.
a Yeah, I mean, like, I grew up in a house where there was no compliments, there's just you're told you're either fat or skinny or a loser or dumb or stupid or whatever it
Yeah.
was. A lot of name calling, but no
Yeah.
love.
Yeah. And how did you manage once you moved to Florida? Did you get through the rest of your school okay?
Yeah, when I got to Florida, I didn't know a single person. I was totally defiant. I hated being there. When school started, I didn't go to class. Go to the beach. I lived in Sarasota, Florida, and because I really didn't care. I just didn't. I just hated being there. I made no effort to, like, get involved in any of the activities, and I wound up working at a restaurant. And then one of the things that happened was, um, and I talk a lot about this in my book, but one of the things that happened was my adopted father. His name was Richard. He was at home, he didn't have a job, this is in Florida, and he would when we'd come home, he would, yell at us about trivial things. It was just constant. It was constant berating. One day I came home and he took my driver's license and wouldn't give it back to me. And I just and listen, I'm not like a violent guy. I'm just, a regular guy. And
Yeah.
I grew up
Yeah.
where I was forced to be tough because he forced me to be tough. But I wasn't a fighter. And we're in the kitchen and he wouldn't give me my license and I lost it. I decked him, I punched him in the face, jumped on him, and we had this massive brawl in front of the rest of the family. Nobody had ever stood up to him. He had been a boxer in college. He was a tough guy. He had a big mouth. He was a bully, and no one ever stood up to him. And I still can't believe that I did it because it's like you read about this thing, you hear about these things, people in an
Yeah.
emotional, like I was like in an altered state. And I had him on the ground and I had my hands around him. I was gonna choke him out and then I finally got like pulled off of him. Uh and then I left the house and it was pretty brutal after that. One of the You're a therapist, so you'd be interested in this, Lee, is one of the things that I wound up going through a lot of therapy, which I talk about.
Yeah.
I didn't wanna go to it. I was like, "I don't need therapy, man. I'm not, that's for weak people," you know? And of course, I need therapy more than anybody.
Of
Um,
course.
so I have this chapter about this therapy chapter, and I went to a therapist in New York. This is later on. This is when I was in my 40s. Uh,
Yeah.
and I went up there because she is highly specialized in a certain type of therapy where you wind up spending like 6 or 8 hours with her. And I went up there and I sat down, and the first thing she said to me, the therapist, was, "How do you feel? Are you nervous? Are you comfortable?" I being, of course, I being just, self-confident. I said, "Yeah, yeah, I'm great, no problem." And she said, "You're already lying to me." She goes, "Look at your hands. You're wringing your hands. You're not comfortable in your seat. I could tell you're nervous. And we just started with one question. You're already lying to me." So I mean, she just nailed me on that. She just because you sit down, yeah, I'm fine, but really I wasn't fine. But you just say that, and
Of
she
course you do.
basically said, "Yeah, no bullshit here. You know, you came all the way up here. You're paying me a
Yeah.
lot of money. You want to get something out of it, and you tell me the truth about your life or what happens." So that particular therapy session, I went to her one time. She went through the childhood stuff, and she took me through the fight. And she was trying to find out what was the event in your life that really, and I know you've got gone through PTSD or things yourself. Like, what she was
Yeah.
trying to get to, what event is unresolved, what is still out there, and what do you need to talk about? And we wound up spending a ton of time talking about the fight. And one of the things that she said to me was, "If you had not been pulled off of him, would you have killed him?" Lions, predators in the jungle, when they hunt prey, they grab them by the neck. That's how people hunt, how predators in the jungle hunt prey. And that's because that's how you kill them. And that's a natural thing. That's what nature does. And your hands were around his neck. You had him on the ground and your hands were around his neck. Why were your hands around his neck? What was it you were trying to do? And like, and she's making me go back through this because I mean, I don't know what I was trying to do because I was just in it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're in it. You're in it, and this guy's a bastard, man. He was a bastard and he was hated and nobody had ever done that to him. And she said, "Well, would you have killed him if you'd not been pulled off? Would you have killed him?" And I'm like, man, I've never thought about that. Like,
I mean,
so
you're in fight or flight mode. You're in fight mode. You want
right,
all of those years, and I had it with my pathetic stepfather that used to throw me down the stairs, and my mum would check that he was okay and stuff like that. And then in my 30s, he was in the chair. He was in the chair, and he had done something. Police had turned up, and he tried to mouth off. So I just said to him, "Let's have it now. I was swearing, very English terminology, and I'm like, "Let's get out of the chair. We'll have it now." I was a doorman in nightclubs, so I was a lot
right.
bigger and stuff like that. He did not want to know. You could see it just drain out of him, and I didn't even have to do it. He wouldn't even look at me. He would just look. He was just looking away in the chair, and he just seemed to shrink in size. And it was my pathetic mum that was half-heartedly going, "Oh, leave him alone, leave him alone." And I was like, yeah, you know what? It's a shame you didn't do it the other way round, but he just like imploded. It was pathetic to
Mhm.
watch, just to prove the coward that he was.
Yes.
With your in all those, and you d part of me regrets not just beating the hell out of him, but and it's something I'm writing about in the book, is that as much I loathe the guy, he was so pathetic that it almost wasn't even worth it. Don't get me wrong, I question it. I should have done I wish I'd beat the hell out of him and I probably would have done what you'd done, but he was so pathetic. It just makes me laugh now. With yourself, what happened afterwards with that guy? Because he's obviously a coward. Anyone could be a bully, but it's when they get exposed.
Right, right, right. Well, because I just like moved to Florida. I didn't have any friends. I didn't know
Yeah.
where to go. So I wound up like going to the beach for 2 or 3 days and trying to find somebody that I could stay with. And I had gotten a job at a restaurant. So I wound up, one of the waitresses there let me sleep on her couch, which I would have liked to have slept in the bedroom, but there was none of that happening. That wasn't happening.
Not lucky.
Yeah, well, in my book, I actually try to mix up, like, humor with,
Of
serious stuff,
course.
and
Yeah,
it's reality, it's like
of course.
and I remember, and part of my book, I try to do research and call people in the past in my life, uh and I tried to find this girl, but I couldn't find her, but I did find other people to make sure that things that were in the book were accurate and everything
Yeah,
was. But so eventually I wound up going back to my house, and he wouldn't speak to me. There was no apologies. I would be on one side of the house and he would be on the other. We'd be in the same room, we wouldn't speak. And I was a kid, I was a teenager. He's the adult, and I'm living in this just stress fest. So eventually, I went to college and flunked out. I had terrible grades because I don't even know why I was in college. Just did a lot of partying, and also was inspired by some of the books that I had read to try to help other people and to try
yeah,
to, I had a big heart, try to help people in similar situations similar to mine. Um, and try to, I tried to be like a big brother. I always looked for a father, I wanted a father that gave a shit. And,
yeah.
that set me on a different journey once I was at school.
And when did you actually move out from the house then? How old were you then when you moved?
Well, when I started college, I was 18. And then, I would come home on the
Yeah,
summers, and then I wound up, moving, to Israel on my own. And I went and
yeah,
lived on a kibbutz. I just went.
yeah,
I just did it. And this is like the '80s. It was not as, people wouldn't do that now, but I mean, I went there, you'd hitchhike. I worked on a kibbutz, which people have learned a lot more about since October 7th. And, I wanted to join the Israeli Defense Force. That was what like, I want to go fight, fight for somebody, fight for a cause, fight for Israel, fight for whoever. Um, and so that's what I started to do, and then I had to got called back to the States by my mother because there were some things happening at home, and also if I wanted to get back into college, I had to reapply, and so I wound up going back after about a year in Israel. But while I was in Israel, and I think this is a really good message, and it goes to like adversity to strength. The theme of your podcast here is I
yeah,
realized that because I'd been through so much shit, I got kicked out of school. I fought with my father. My biological father was who knows where. He was,
yeah,
s- and I realized that while I was in Israel and kind of like trying to get a grip on what I wanted to do, that nobody was going to help me but myself. Self help means helping yourself. And I read some self help books while I was there. They had a library. And it's like, okay, you can either wallow in pity and be a victim your entire life and whine about your situation, or you can, rise up and overcome adversity and things that are handed to you and turn like victimhood into victory or however you want to phrase it. Um, uh, and because no one's going to do it for you, you got to do it yourself, out of that.
yeah. Nobody's coming. You're doing it on your own with your set of circumstances. Definitely nobody's coming to help you. I waited long enough for somebody to turn up and offered help. I gave up and I had to do it
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
And you have to come to that, listen, I'm a father of 5 kids, and we don't enable my kids are all grown pretty
yeah.
much now, but of all the parents out there that are watching this, and a lot of kids are going through anxiety, and you want to solve their problems for them, but you can't. And you know that
No.
as a therapist for sure.
Yeah, no, it's like with like my kids, especially my sons. I get them to take accountability, and they're both intelligent. And it's like, right, you make good choices. You make your own choices. If you make a bad choice, the chances are you got a good idea that you're going to make it. And if you make this choice, whether it's staying up late when you've got an exam in the morning, you've not studied for it, there's a consequence to pay. So I try and get them to understand consequences there as well, and the importance of making good choices there as well. And I'm like, you're on your own in this life. Yeah.
Mhm.
You don't hang around the city at 2 o'clock in the morning at a park where there's idiots around that's got knives. It's not a
That's
movie
right.
where I'm gonna come round the corner and save you. You're on your own on this. Make good choices. So that's kind of the way that I've gone about that. It helps being a therapist, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, but, when you're on your own as a person, like I was in my circumstance, I came to the realization that I needed to do it myself,
Yeah.
and that's so that triggered me going back to college and, eventually and studying. I was able to study and get myself into law school, and I made a decision that I wanted to help people and help
Yeah.
families. People have gone through things like I had gone through growing up, and trying to helping people overcome trauma, helping them I serve as a guardian ad litem, like I testify in court about kids and the best place for them to be placed. And I do that as a volunteer. I volunteered to represent firefighters in 9/11 as a volunteer trial lawyer, where I represented families of firefighters who had passed away. And there was a big, fund. So you're trying to, I designed my life so I could try to help people avoid the things that I went through, or when they do get in trouble, to make sure that I can try to help get them out of it, try to
Yeah.
help lead them in the right direction.
What was the point that you got to where you thought, I want to do something to help other people? Because there always seems to be, whether it's like an epiphany moment for some people or you grow into it. For me, I just got to a point where I'm like, I can't live the life I'm living unfulfilled, fairly meaningless. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think once I went to law school, and I had read a bunch of books, even novels that where people, somebody had been, squashed as a kid, and then they rally and they overcome obstacles and show resilience, and then they rally and they make something of themselves. And for me, when I was in law school, I started working in one of the courthouses and seeing the prosecutors, seeing how the judicial system worked, seeing how as a lawyer you can help people if you're a good lawyer and you're honest and ethical, and people come to you with problems. And it's you know nobody sees a lawyer because everything's great. They see a lawyer when there's a problem. And
Same.
so, yeah, and there's some really bad lawyers out there, or there's some really great ones, and I wanted
Yeah.
to be in a position where I could help people. That's what So watching cases, trials in the courthouse, I knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah. I can imagine when you went back to college, it was like being a completely different person that time.
Absolutely, 100%. And I actually was a little more confident than I had been, and I had hair back then, and so I joined a fraternity. I
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a good time.
And with like your mum and the guy that you grew up with, what happened then? You've been away from Israel, you've come back to Israel, you've then changed your life, you've got real goals and aspirations there, confidence there. What happened then? Did they drift away from you? Or,
Right. So I had 7 brothers and sisters, and we tried to stay connected as a family, and because we'd all been adopted together. And when I came back, I didn't have a relationship with my adopted father. I mean, we got to the point where we could be in the same room, but we never really talked. I mean, we just, you spend my whole life not talking to him. And I think it started out because very early on, when he moved in our house, I refused to call him dad. And I was like
yeah,
7 years old, and everybody called him dad, and my mother, mom, and I refused to call him dad because I had a biological father, even though he
exactly.
left.
Yeah,
So, yeah. So when I came back, you know, I never lived with him again, and I went out on my own and got a job, and I'd always tried to respect my mother and try to be, upbeat and positive, but it doesn't always work. So also during this time, I had decided that I wanted to go find out what happened to my biological father and confront him. And so
what made you do that? What
I
made
just
you do?
felt like I think it was a combination of just being really pissed off about
Yeah,
him being mature enough to understand he did the wrong thing, and he never even we lived in the same town other than almost killing himself in front of me. I had never seen him, and I wanted to look at him man to man and say, you know, you're a coward or what, you know, something inside of me felt like this is a challenge. I'm going to be the courageous one and go knock on his door. And I still look at it like, man, that was pretty courageous. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So I went to New Jersey. This is during my college, and he was a veterinarian, and I knocked on his door, and um, he didn't recognize me, so I had to like introduce myself, and he was a mess. He was a mess.
Right.
He was a mess. You know, he had bad scars on his face, lost
From the accident.
from the accident. From the accident, he survived the accident. I found out he got like 300 stitches in his face, ruptured spleen, broken ribs. I mean, and I got to know him a little bit. I also found out I had other siblings. I got to know him a little bit, but he wasn't a well person. You know, he was not he wasn't warm. He was like a person that was like a brain injured person. Anyway, and when he wound up passing away. Like, I never really connected with him, but he was not a person you could really talk to. He was like a person on the spectrum. I think he cared because, you know, he tried to make the effort, but he just was a weak person. So what
Yeah.
happened was I found out after he passed away, I decided to go to his funeral, and while I was at his funeral, I learned that he had actually also been a writer, and he had written all these articles and magazine articles that had been published, and kept a journal for 30 or 40 years. And his cousin came up to me. There weren't many people at the funeral because he didn't have any friends. And he said, I understand you're his biological son. I have a lot of his work. And I was like, what work? He goes, well, his writing. And I'm like, what writing? I thought he was a veterinarian. And I learned he'd been a writer, and he had kept a journal for between 1960 and 1990. He wrote letters and journals almost every day of his life, like thousands of pages, thousands. And so I wound up with all of this eventually, and um, decided to start reading through it. Uh, I mean, it's great. Like the work, and I've got pictures of some of the stuff in the book. I mean, he would type on napkins, you know, single space typed on napkins, on backs of book covers, on like all different, like he was crazy, but he also was a great writer. And he also wrote about what happened with us. And he wrote in detail about the accident, and he had hired a private investigator to try to find me because he tried to reach out to my parents to get pictures of us, and they said no. So he hired an investigator to get pictures, and they found me working at this tennis court. So he knew I worked there. And so he was in the office on that 4th of July, took like 3 or 4 Valium. Also had a drug problem, and got in his car and drove to the tennis courts and hit the telephone pole. And in that, he wrote a description very graphic about how he remembers regaining consciousness with he called it his pancake eye was hanging from his eyelid had come off and all this. And when he opened his eyes, he said, when I opened my eyes, I saw a teenager standing there, and then he wrote Steve question mark. So he saw me, and then I never talked to him about it. But so I was able to learn a lot from what he
Yeah.
wrote about his feelings and what had happened.
So he had hired a private. Your parent, obviously, stepfather and your mum, wouldn't, which is a crazy reason not to tell him. He wants to get in contact. Better late than never. And to calm his nerves down, he's took 4 Valiant to drive to see you.
Well,
And,
yeah, to drive by the tennis courts, whether or not he was like, I learned later
uh,
that he had done he definitely would drive around town trying to see if he could see us. He probably saw me other times, but he never stopped. My question is, if he hadn't hit the telephone pole, would he have actually pulled in and talked to me? I don't know. He never did that.
I mean, you're never going to know for certain. But if you're somebody that's taken 4 Valiant, that's surely to calm your nerves down, and you're
Yeah.
not going to need 4 Valium to drive past the tennis court. So, without knowing, I would make probably a calculated assumption that he'd made made his mind up to speak that day, and it's the valiant, the four valiants are called the accident. Now, I mean, it's a sliding doors moment,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was going through your mind? It must have been surreal when you're reading it. Talk about a page turner. You're reading all this journaling.
Well, that's not even the crazy parts. So and this part's in the book, but what he also wrote about. So he winds up, he's in bad shape. He's in the hospital. He can't drive. And he gets a letter from the president of the tennis club, saying, you know, the telephone pole was destroyed and it hit the fence, and you owe us money for the property that was damaged at the tennis court. And he copied, it was from a lawyer and the president of the tennis club. And so they wanted their money for the damage he had done, which is reasonable, except that the president of the tennis club was my adopted father. That was Richard. It was so he knew that my biological father had been in this horrible accident and never told me. We lived in the same house. This is the same man that I had to fight with. So he was the president of the club, writing a letter to my biological father, probably with pleasure, saying, if you don't pay us, we're going to sue you. And so I never knew any of this until I read it. And then, so my mother knew about the accident. They obviously knew about the accident. They just didn't know I was there. And so what he did is he got one of the people that worked for him to take him to the hardware store one night, and they got his initials, ASN. ASN, those were his initials. Like they got those little things you see, like just the letters that you can nail into things.
Yeah.
And he had her drive him to the tennis court, and he nailed the initials into the telephone pole. And because it was for him, it was some kind of victory or something, because he bought the pole, so he wanted his name on it. And I just thought that was completely crazy. I'm like, that is just crazy. Like, but like what man, that's crazy. So I couldn't believe that. And then, so I was able to get in touch with part of the writing the book, the woman that worked for him. And I had a really great conversation with her. And she said, oh, absolutely. He could barely see, he could barely walk, he could barely stand up, but it was very important for him to go to that telephone pole and put those initials in the pole. And Lee, some I got all kinds of response in my book, people writing me very nice things and a lot of reviews. I also got a picture that a woman read my book and she loved it, and she lives up there in New Jersey, and she sent me a picture of herself with a copy of my book in front of the telephone pole.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, I thought that was the coolest thing. And she wrote, I loved your book, so I thought I'd see if I could find the letters, but I didn't see them. That I mean, there's so many different things, because I
Yeah.
combined his words with mine. And then what wound up, one of the other things that I got, and I started out with this, pretend they're dead. So you have my biological father, that's my biological father, and then that's my twin sister. That's my twin sister, and then that's me. I also
Mm.
have a brother, another brother, but he, out of respect for him, he didn't want his picture on the cover, and I didn't really talk much about him in the book. But Pretend They Are Dead comes from a magazine article that I wound up with as part of his writing, that he wrote in the mid 70s, with a picture in the article, there's a picture of a man with his bath, his three kids, and he writes about the last night that he spent with us. He knew he was dropping us off and not coming back. And he wrote about that.
Mm.
He in the article, he said he had gone to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, just pretend they are dead. And so don't have any contact with them, just walk away. And so that's what he did.
It's just the dumbest advice you could give somebody, to abandon your children and pretend they're dead. You can't do that. You'd have to be a certain sort of like sociopath or something to be able to do that, to abandon your children, because the guilt, the unanswered questions, there's just so much there. And obviously it's affected him, because look what happened with the
Oh,
accident. That
yeah.
accident would never have happened.
No.
Never got into that state with if he had not been given that
Oh,
advice.
it I know it ruined his life. There's
Yeah.
no, you know, you deal with people going through divorces. There's all shapes and sizes and everything else. But live like I said, we live right down the street, and he made that choice, and it ruined him because in throughout the pages that he's written, um, you know, he spends a lot of time moaning to himself about some of the decisions he made and talking about how he wasn't not able to see us. And this went on for years, years and years. So, but I learned so part of my book is his book too, because I put a lot of his work in there. And he was a great writer, but you know, there's some things that you just as a son you don't even want to know. I don't need to read about my father's sex life, but he wrote about it. But
No.
you know, just all
Yeah.
kinds.
What about the unanswered questions that you had? You're reading that and you're like, my stepfather and my mum knew this and they never said anything. I mean, what's going through your mind? I mean, that is that anger, is it resentment, is it betrayal?
Oh, all of it. It's all of it. I was really, you know, this is something going back 40 years ago or more, 50 years ago. And so reading for the first time that they knew about the accident and actually threatened to sue him, it just,
Couldn't make it up.
the whole thing blows me away. I mean, just think of the craziness, that whole of my father, besides the fact he crashed into the pole and I was the only person there and he almost died in front of me. And then he, then my stepfather and my mom find out. They don't say anything to me. They threaten to sue him. And then he, instead of being rational, he goes out in the middle of the night and puts these letters in the pole. It's like, what is that? That's crazy.
It's like, you make me pay for a poll. Bearing in mind I nearly died. It's going to be my poll, and I'm going to leave my signature
Yeah.
there, or at least my letters, at least there as well. Did you ever speak to your mum about the letters? About, you didn't tell me this. Look, read this. Anything like that at all?
I did. Yeah. I've spoken to her a lot. I mean, she told me that she was very proud of me, even though she couldn't tell me, you know, for standing up to Richard, to my stepfather, for, you know, because I was the only person that would ever stand up to him. So, but at the time, she didn't act like she was proud of me. She acted like she was afraid of him. So
Yeah, of course.
she was afraid of him, and there's a big fear there, and you know, and she's apologized up and down many times and I know feels a lot of guilt about it. And so I have a good relationship. I've shown her some of the letters, and I sent a copy of my book to my twin sister before it got published to have her read it to see what she thinks. And I know you're writing memoir, you know, your family's going to have a
Yeah.
reaction, and so we did. And my sister read it and said, you know, she loved it, but she said I wasn't tough enough. She goes, "You weren't tough enough. You're too easy." And I said, "Well, this is my journey, not yours." But because you know everybody has you're in a house and everybody has their own story to tell, and everybody sees
Yeah.
things their own way. So I talked to my mother about it.
What made you decide to write a book?
I just after getting all the letters and the writing from him and
Avoidable.
and at the funeral, and then I decided that um, I wanted to. I was going through a divorce. I was by myself. It was really therapeutic to start writing.
Yeah,
I like to
of
write.
course.
And so I started putting things together. And then when I started reading what he had written, I started coming up with this idea. Well, maybe I'll finish the his book by writing my own book. And so that's kind of how it started. And I also wanted to reach out and help. There's so many people out there that are struggling,
Yeah.
that are afraid to share their story, that are ashamed. And so I
Yeah.
wanted to reach out to try to help other people.
Yeah, it's a great thing. It's a really noble thing to do, and a lot of people that's been through the adversity. You know yourself, there's going to be so many people out there that's been through the same or similar to you. The abandonment, there, the unanswered question, the abusive stepfather, the list goes on. And that's the same for me with my memoir, and speaking out about what my parents put me through and stuff like that. For me, it is the same story. If I can help just one person, it really is like that as well. And you already know with your book there as well that it's affected people in a positive way.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I've gotten really great response. So I'm really happy about that. And, you know, we'll see where it takes me. But I know that I'm making a difference and I've been invited to speak at a bunch of places and, I hope people will listen to the podcast and support
Yeah.
my book and support your book and support the podcast. I think it's great.
Yeah, and yeah, we'll have the link will be in the description there for your book there, and anything else there as well. But I think anyone that's going to listen to your story is going to be glued to it, because it's just, you don't know which way it's going to go, and there's
It's,
just
it's,
so much in there.
it's still going. It's still
It's
going.
still
It's
going.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Where do you feel you're at in what your journey? Because it's a fair old journey, and it's one that, as they say, you're never going to reach the destination. But where do you feel you're at? Because you've changed your whole life, overcome so much, and now you're trying to help others while still learning new things about yourself, evolving.
yeah, no, absolutely. And no, I keep, listen, I mean, we all have many things happening in our brain, and there's still moments where I get, down or frustrated about what's happening. And,
Yeah,
I learned through all this process how to be a better husband because I'd not been I'm not like a guy that like screwed around, but I wasn't very intimate. I didn't have a lot of emotion because of what
yeah,
I'd been through. My
of
feelings were
course.
dulled. And so I've learned how to have feelings, and I'm really happy in the relationship I'm in now. And I adopted a son, and I really, but my journey is like, I can't say it's just starting because I'm in my 60s, but I still have a long way to go, and I really want to make a
Yeah.
difference.
And it does feel like I mean, you're obviously not getting started. You're on a journey, but it's like it's certainly into a different chapter for you.
It's,
Along with the
yeah.
speaking and the writing, and where you're at with yourself, the work on yourself as well. So
Yeah. I tell people and all this writing stuff, I'm like, I'm a new writer, but I'm an old one, So, and I still love practicing law. I still really enjoy it. And so I'll be here. I'm in Orlando. So, anybody coming to Disney and want to stop by, I'm here.
yeah, Disney and a lawyer. That's an American combination.
That is right.
So you managed to settle in Orlando then?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was a good compromise after law school, and I had different opportunities, some in South Florida, some on the West Coast, and Orlando is a good kind of middle ground.
yeah. That's great. It's such an amazing story, fascinating. Listening to the story, you generally don't know which way it's going to go, even though you kind of obviously know the story beforehand there as well. I think your strength's unbelievable to overcome what you come through, to deal with it, to figure out what you want to do in your life, to go to Israel, to get a year's experience in just life, come back, and then go through law school, and deal with the things that's come up there in the way that you've dealt with that. I think it's really inspiring. And anyone that listens to any of your podcasts that you do, and obviously any talks, and read your book there as well, I think it's gonna make a difference, even if the story isn't a relatable story, in the sense that they've been through similar to yourself. It's just an inspiring story on its own. So I
Yeah.
think it's brilliant.
No, I appreciate that, and I kind of look at it. There's plenty of things that happened that aren't in the book that were also just as challenging. Um, I look at it like, there's I had all these obstacles placed in front of me. I'm a marathon runner, and I'm not going to stop until I cross the finish line. And that's how I kind of I look at life. There's always obstacles. I ran the London Marathon actually a few years ago, and I remember the London Marathon. I remember the cobblestones, and you just want to stop and just, man, this is tough, but you gotta just like life. You just got to keep going.
Yeah. I mean, you got the right mindset, because one of the things that I figured out a long time ago, and try and use all the time, and I get clients to do it, is to change the word from problems to obstacle. Just changing that word makes such a difference there. And if you're
Right,
using
right,
obstacles,
right.
that I'm listening to somebody that can overcome everything.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That really is. So, but I appreciate you having me on here, Lee, and
Yeah.
really enjoy talking to you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on, and best of luck with the book and the speaking there. Thank you so much there, Steve.